Alright, today we're going to be tearing down a 2013 Polaris Sportsman 800, and this is probably one of the dirtiest motors that I've ever tore down. So I didn't do a whole lot of cleaning up beforehand, but we'll go ahead and start disassembling it. We've got Allen heads to pull the exhaust manifold off. We've got 4 of those, and I've already loosened those up. They're a 6mm Allen, so we can go ahead and remove those, and that's your manifold there. Here, an exhaust leak, a lot of times there's a donut here, and that could be your problem, or a lot of times these crack down under here, just the amount of heat coming out of there. And Polaris does have a problem with those cracking there. So take a look at that. We've got 10mm heads, bolts going around this head cover. We're going to go ahead and pull all of these out. And there is your push rods there, and your rockers, your valves are underneath here, and we'll go ahead and pull these out. Just 10mm on the top here. Don't have to worry about removing cam chain tension or anything on these. So here's your rockers. There's 4 of those. And then your push rods will just pull out of there. We'll remove this head next, and these are generally pretty tight, and they take a 12-point socket here, and these are torqued down going back together, so they are a lot of times pretty tight coming off of there. Alright, we'll go ahead and let that air compressor build up some pressure while we start to pull the stator cover off here. This is just a plastic cover on here, and this cover just pops off. There's that cover, and then we'll go ahead and continue to remove that stator cover. Again, 10mm all the way around it. Just popped off like that. You've got a sensor on the bottom here. There's your starter drive gear here, and then we've got your flywheel here, and your starter obviously back here. So this cover. And we'll go ahead and pull this stator, or the flywheel, sorry, and the stator. So we've got a flywheel puller. It's like this, it's a claw. Run this in there, and I like to put this back on there, and that's basically just so if threads get dinged up or something, we still have this that we take off, and that kind of cleans those threads up. But you're not going to be able to go very far with that on there. You run this in. Now what I like to do is just take, there we go, and that just pops it right off. Spin these out. And that flywheel, once we pull this nut off here, we'll just be able to slide right off. It's a tapered crankshaft, which is what keeps that on there. We've got a keeper here. We'll have to pull that off at some point. And then we can pull your stator. Your stator wires come out the bottom of your motor here, and these take just an Allen bolt. Very tight, but I bet they were put in there with Loctite just to make sure they didn't come out when it's spinning. So it looks like we've got 2 torques on the bottom there. All right, and there is the stator there. And test that, three yellow wires and a brown one. Pretty easy to do a resistance test on that. And there's that holder you can see that was holding this in. Here's your starter drive. And that just kind of, when the starter spins, this comes out here and engages that flywheel, spins the motor, starts your four-wheeler. 6 head bolts are out. These bolts, with enough air, we're able to pull those out. Then your cylinder will just slide right off of there. And there is your head there. Or your head will just slide right off, sorry. But this set does not here, which is fantastic. There's your cylinder there. Inspect those walls, make sure they're good. Inspect your pistons. A lot of times if you're pulling your motor down like this, you replace at least the rings. I think I'd always replace the piston as well, but just so you're not having to come back in here and do it a year later. Pull these pistons, just find the groove, slide a pick in behind there, or a very small screwdriver, pop that circlip out of there. Make sure it doesn't go flying. I just kind of keep my finger over top of it there. And then these pins should just come out. Sometimes if they're a little old, sometimes you gotta persuade them to come out. All right, there's one there. There's your pin there. We can put that circlip back on there. And then you don't want to beat on it too hard without supporting that crank. But sometimes it just takes a little tap. And there's your other piston there. We'll pull this starter. You guys are able to see that there. Just have 2 bolts holding that on. And then we can just, that starter's got a shaft here that's got O-rings that'll seal it up. Make sure you don't damage that pulling this apart. Clean that up really good before we go back together. Now we'll pull that water pump off, and that's about it before we split that case. All right, we've got your water pump over here. And we'll pull the water pump cover, which is 8mm bolts. There is your water pump. Here's an O-ring here. You want to replace that, going back together. And there's your impeller. And this will spin. Could potentially spin when you do that, so just be careful you don't have your finger down in there. And then very carefully, this has got a gasket back here, an O-ring. And so, kind of got to break that seal, pop it off there. And then this cover is ready to come off. All right. Got your cam gear, your balancer gear behind here. All right. There's your cam sprocket there, and that is a springed gear, so you kind of heard that snap there. You got springs in behind there. We've got your oil pump here. We'll remove that. We've got Allens that go down in there. All right, that is all your oil pump bolts there. Make sure these are completely unthreaded. Here now, what we're going to do is that same puller that we used here, we're going to use same puller we used for the flywheel. We're going to use here. Just got a little bit smaller bolts for this one here. All right, and that's as simple as that. Not too hard. So you can always kind of feel it pop, and when it pops, that means it's out. You don't need to keep. We're going to have to turn that cam to make sure we can slide it out of there. And we've got a couple more of the Torx to pull these off. That'll allow us to pull that cam out of there. All right. That's out, and as long as our caps here aren't in our way, we'll be able to pull this out. But if we were to tip this upside down, those caps would probably just fall out. And you just kind of spin it back and forth, and you're able to pull that out just like that. And you can hear those caps dropping out the back. Pull this last gear here before we go to split it. There's our oil pump. It can come out now. Make sure we grab the other gears down in there. There's your oil pump there. And if you remember, that impeller sat on the end of that. And we'll get the puller out again. Alright, that's pulled out of there. We're able just to pull that off of there just like that. You can see if I would have ran these bolts too far, it would have damaged that case. So just be careful pulling that for now. Okay, now we're going to pull these bottom bolts off. If I can get it to where you can see it a little bit better there. A lot of 13mm bolts. Alright, we've got a couple clear down in here now. I was using an impact socket, but those are a little bit thicker, so I grabbed a regular socket to allow me to get down in there a little bit easier. Alright, get that mount off of there. I'll be able to get down in there. Alright, I think that's all of them. Alright, crankcase is split. And we've got your balancer gear here, and your crank is here. And this just sets down in there. And just pull it out just like that. And that is splitting the case on a Sportsman 800.